The Mighty Miss Malone, Chapter 7, The Mysterious Smile of the Man on the Quaker Oats Box. The next morning, I woke up and wiggled my toes. My feet felt heavy and horrible. Then I remembered. I'd worn Mrs. Needham's niece's shoes to bed. I took them off and got up and started getting ready for school. When I was dressed, I must have tried 6 times to go downstairs wearing my new shoes. Mrs. Needham said I shouldn't save them, and Mother had told me it was okay to put them on, but something wouldn't let me take more than 2 tippity-tap steps to head downstairs. I sat on the bed and picked up my old no-heeled shoes. Since this was the last day of school, I could wear them one more time, and I would go barefoot all summer long. I put my regular shoes back on. I'd never noticed before how much they cramped up my toes. By the time I got downstairs, my feet were back to being used to them. Father was on the couch reading a newspaper, and Jimmy had his head on the arm of the couch and his feet tucked under Father's legs. This is a bad habit Jimmy picked up from Mother. She's always complaining that her feet are cold, and when she's laying on the couch reading, she'll ask me or Jimmy or Father to sit on her feet so they'll warm up. She's turned us into a bunch of brood hens. I gave each of them their good morning kiss, then went into the kitchen and kissed Mother. I reached into the cabinet and pulled out the big new box of oatmeal. Mother said, "Wait, Deza, there's the open box. It must have something left." What was I thinking? I put the new box back and got the open one. I turned the box until the strange looking white man was smiling at me. The man was what Mother says we should call big boned. He was wearing a black cowboy hat, had long gray hair like a very old white woman must have been getting ready to eat his supper, because he had stuffed a fluffy white napkin down into the front of his shirt. Father came into the kitchen. It's funny how something can look so normal to you one day and then all of a sudden it can look so strange. I wonder if that's because as you get smarter and older, you look at things with different eyes, even things you've seen a million times before. I stared at the man on the Quaker Oats box. Mother, Father, who is that man? Father took the box. Well, Deza, I don't think anyone knows. The way he's skinning and grinning, though, he must have just heard some very good news. What do you think the news was? Father looked at Mother. Peg, what would good news for a Quaker be? Mother said, all I know is that Quakers have a reputation for being very honest, and they help a lot of our people get north on the Underground Railroad during slavery. Father clapped his hands. There you go. Our happy Caucasian friend here has been so busy waiting for another escaped slave that he hasn't had a chance to read a newspaper for the last how long have we been free? Father did the math in his head. 73 years. Wow. That is that wow, it was only 73 years ago that Lincoln freed the slaves. So, Dard what? This guy's so happy because he just heard about the Emancipation Proclamation. He's overjoyed because he can quit fighting for freedom and get back to quaking. I pulled the round cardboard top off the oatmeal box and stuck my face over the opening. The smell of the oatmeal was lovely. I closed the box and shook it. Shaking made little bits of powder float around inside the box. When I pulled the lid off again, I dropped the box and screamed. Mother and Father jumped and Jimmy came running into the kitchen. I pointed at the floor. There, along the spilled cereal, was a army of teeny-weeny, wiggling, squiggling, wormy-looking bugs and beetles trying to hide under the flakes of oatmeal. Mother said, Deza Malone, do you have any idea how much a box of oatmeal costs? Sweep that cereal back into the box this instant. I don't know what was a bigger surprise, the bugs and worms or Mother telling me to sweep them back. Father smiled at me. Deza, those are only some harmless beetles that hitched a ride. I couldn't believe it. I was having to point out something so obvious to Father. Most times he was very quick to understand. I crossed my arms. But they're bugs! Bugs in the food? He crouched down so he was looking me square in the eye, something that made me feel big and important and small and silly all at the same time. Deza, times are hard. We can't waste a thing. I stamped my foot. Father, they're bugs. He went from crouching to sitting on the floor with his legs crossed in front of him. My mighty Miss Malone, you know I haven't worked regular for months now. We're going to have to be very careful until I can find work. That might be a while. He reached over and pinched a bunch of the spilled oatmeal into his hand. A couple of the bugs scurried around in his palm, ducking between flakes like they were hiding under an umbrella. The bugs are harmless. Father smiled and tossed the oatmeal, bugs and all, into his mouth. Jimmy yelled, "Holy macaroni!" He scooped up a pinch of bugs and cereal and threw them into his mouth. Mother said, "Roscoe, James, neither of you knows when to stop. Deza, before I cook the oatmeal, I always sift any of those beetles out, and the boiling water kills any germs." The news was getting worse. Mother had used buggy oatmeal before. I felt my stomach clenching and twisting just like I'd eaten another bad piece of fish. My mother said, "The last time I checked, Deza, your birth certificate said Malone and not Rockefeller. We just can't afford to throw any kind of food out, my dear." Father got up and started out of the kitchen. Jimmy said, "Hey, Pa, how come you quit talking?" Father had been quiet since he'd put the buggy oatmeal in his mouth. Jimmy grabbed his arm. "What's wrong, Pa? Cat got your tongue?" Father had tried to teach me a lesson, but the lesson wasn't going to go as far as chewing or swallowing the wiggling worms. Father slapped the back of Jimmy's head, and when Jimmy said, "Hey," and ducked, Father spit the oatmeal into his other hand. "What, Jimmy? I didn't hear what you said." All the way to school, Jimmy couldn't quit talking about how him and Father had eaten some bugs. Wait till I tell everyone. I rolled my eyes. That was all he needed to do. Give people more ammunition to shoot at him on the last day of school. But with Jimmy, it's best to come at things sideways. "Jimmy, don't tell anyone. You know we're not supposed to talk with anyone about what happens at home." Jimmy said, "Yeah, that means we can't talk about family business. This ain't business. This is something funny." Me and Jimmy look at the world in different ways. While Jimmy was bragging about eating buggy cereal, I was promising myself that I was through with oatmeal for the rest of my life.